Coco Gauff has just entered one of the most controversial debates in tennis, and her answer is anything but simple. The WTA has introduced a new genetic screening policy for players competing on the women's tour, and Gauff says she understands the reasoning behind it. But at the same time, she has a very different message for anyone using this debate to attack the transgender community. And that is what makes Coco Gauff's position so interesting. She is not simply choosing one side. Instead, Gauff is calling for fairness in women's sports while also warning against turning a complicated sports policy into a reason to target or disrespect transgender people. So what exactly did Coco Gauff say? Why does she believe fairness matters? And why is she concerned about the way this conversation is being used? Let's break it all down. Coco Gauff has never been afraid to speak her mind when important issues extend beyond the tennis court. And now, during the Canadian Open, the American star has found herself at the center of another major conversation. The topic is the WTA's newly introduced women's eligibility policy. Under the new policy, players competing on the women's tour must undergo a one-time screening for the SRY gene, which is associated with the Y chromosome and typical male development. The test can involve a cheek swab, blood sample, or saliva sample. The WTA says the goal is to maintain fair competition and equal athletic opportunities in women's professional tennis. The policy came into effect in July 2026. But because the issue involves both competitive fairness and gender identity, it has quickly become a highly sensitive subject. And when Coco Gauff was asked about it, she gave an unusually nuanced response. Coco Gauff's position. Gauff made it clear that she understands why the WTA believes biological differences need to be considered when creating eligibility rules for women's sports. In other words, she recognizes the argument surrounding competitive fairness. But Gauff also expressed concern about what happens when the conversation goes beyond sport. Her biggest issue is not simply the existence of a policy. It is the way the debate can be used. Gauff warned that some people may use discussions about eligibility and fairness as an opportunity to attack transgender people. And she made it clear that she does not support that. That distinction is extremely important, because Gauff is essentially saying that two ideas can exist at the same time. Women's sports should have rules designed to protect competitive fairness. And transgender people should not be treated with hostility or used as targets in a political or cultural fight. That is the balance Gauff appears to be calling for. Why this issue is so controversial. The WTA says its policy is designed specifically around eligibility for women's professional tennis. The organization has also stated that the policy distinguishes between biological sex and gender identity only to the extent necessary to establish eligibility, and that it does not intend to disrespect anyone's gender identity or dignity. But critics have raised concerns about the broader implications of genetic screening. Supporters of the policy argue that women's professional sports require eligibility standards that account for biological differences. Opponents and human rights advocates have questioned whether genetic screening can create stigma or unfairly place certain athletes under suspicion. And this is exactly where the conversation becomes complicated. It is no longer only about tennis. It becomes a discussion about science, sporting fairness, privacy, identity, inclusion, and how athletes should be treated. That is why Gauff's response has attracted so much attention. Gauff's call for a more nuanced conversation. One of the biggest points from Gauff was her desire for nuance. She acknowledged that there are legitimate questions surrounding fairness in women's sports. But she also questioned the hostility that can emerge around the subject. Her message is essentially this: you can have a serious conversation about sporting eligibility without turning transgender people into the enemy. That is a significant distinction. And it also explains why Gauff said she found the issue difficult to answer without having her words misunderstood or misrepresented. In today's social media environment, complicated statements can quickly become simplified. A headline can make a nuanced position look like a simple yes or no answer. But Gauff's actual position is much more complicated. She is trying to separate the sporting policy discussion from attacks on an entire community. The WTA policy. To understand Gauff's comments, we also need to understand what the WTA has actually changed. The new policy requires women's tour players to complete a one-time screening process involving the SRY gene. The WTA says the purpose is to preserve the integrity of women's professional tennis and maintain fair competition. The policy is also part of a wider movement in international sport toward biological eligibility rules. World athletics, for example, introduced SRY testing for athletes competing in the female category in 2025. So tennis is not operating in isolation. Coco Gauff's big message. At the center of everything is a simple message from Coco Gauff. She believes women's sports deserve fairness. But she also believes transgender people deserve respect. Those positions do not have to cancel each other out. And Gauff appears to be asking fans, athletes, and officials to have a more thoughtful conversation, rather than reducing the issue to slogans. Whether people agree with the WTA policy or disagree with it, the discussion is clearly not going away. And Coco Gauff's comments have added another important voice to that debate. So, what do you think about Coco Gauff's position? Do you agree that professional women's sports need clear eligibility rules while also believing that transgender people should not be targeted or attacked? Or do you think the WTA needs to reconsider how this policy is implemented? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And remember, this is a complicated issue, so keep the discussion respectful. If you enjoyed this update, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more breaking tennis news, Coco Gauff updates, and the biggest stories from the WTA. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.